The Rise of Skywalker is set to introduce many new revelations to the Star Wars franchise that will change the sequel trilogy and the Skywalker saga as we know it by writer and director J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, what's really exciting about Episode 9 is that we do know that this film is going to have a lot of callbacks to the prequels and the originals, as well as Star Wars Rebels, and even using Star Wars Legends material as a form of inspirational source material to tell the story of Episode 9. Now, these past couple of weeks or so, we've been learning a whole lot more about this film, and when it all comes down to one of the concept art descriptions, this is where things begin to get very exciting for the Rise of Skywalker. Now, specifically, what's really intriguing about all of this has all to do with, of course, the characters of Darth Maul and, of course, Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren. Now, specifically, a description of Kylo Ren and his Knights of Ren traveling into what's described to be an abandoned Imperial base, where it's said that they eventually discover Palpatine's vault full of Sith relics and artifacts that were left behind many years ago. It's said that eventually Kylo comes across of what is described to be a device that plays a transmission of Darth Maul that was originally recorded for Palpatine just before the events of the Phantom Menace. It's said that in the Darth Maul transmission, he begins to talk about the Wills and how it was the Wills who created the Dark Temples themselves around the entire galaxy, and even created the concept of the Jedi and the Sith ideology that were eventually picked up by the Force sensitives that formed the two iconic sides. Eventually, the discovery of the power of the Beyond between the Jedi and the Sith is what ultimately made them go up against each other and form themselves as enemies, and hence why we see them as the light and the dark associated with, of course, the Jedi and the Sith. It's said that many years ago, Palpatine found Maul's discovery to be very fascinating and kept it tightly guarded. Throughout the life and, of course, after Order 66, he stored it within his own vault. Now, I want to go over a couple of parts about this. Now, we do know that the Jedi and the Sith ideology of the past is going to be explored, the ancient ideology, I should say. Now, what's really exciting about all of this is, of course, Darth Maul's transmission that is played by Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, where they discover this thing within Palpatine's vault. Now, this isn't necessarily a hologram. This is an audio recording, if you will, of Darth Maul and what he discovered in one of the Dark Temples, discovering the legend of the Wills, and how it was the Wills who created these Dark Temples around the entire galaxy that form a bridge to the Beyond. Now, what's even more exciting is that Maul also describes in the transmission that it was the Wills themselves who created the ideology of the Jedi and the Sith, or at least partially, where the Force sensitives eventually picked that up, which ultimately made them the Jedi and the Sith. But what really made them split apart as enemies is, of course, the discovery of the power of the Beyond, which is, of course, what set the Jedi and the Sith apart. Now, what I like about this is that this really does change Star Wars history. It makes us look at the Jedi and the Sith in a different light. Now, I'm not quite sure how the fans are going to react to this once it's actually going to be portrayed on the big screen within, of course, you know, the abandoned Imperial base that Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren discover within Palpatine's vault itself, containing this transmission of Darth Maul talking about the Wills and the ancient Jedi and Sith ideology that really formed, of course, themselves to become enemies once they discovered the power of the Beyond. Now, what I also like about this, though, is that it really dives deep into Jedi, Sith, and Force lore to really tell us exactly what happened thousands of years ago, well before there was any kind of empire or any kind of major organization. This is well before the events of the Phantom Menace. We're talking thousands upon thousands of years ago. And what I like about this as well is that this is said to take place, you know, legends-wise, well before the events of the Old Republic era. Now, we do know that Disney and Lucasfilm are aiming to make the Old Republic era canon, to base it hundreds of years before the events of Episode 1, as opposed to thousands, like how it was in the EU. And I believe the reason as to why they are aiming to do that is because they want to actually base the thousands of years ago element of Star Wars to be more based on the ancient Jedi and Sith side, where hundreds of years before Episode 1 would be centered on the Old Republic. So I can understand why they would be aiming for hundreds of years instead of thousands for the Old Republic era now. Now, with that being said, what's really exciting about Episode 9 is that, of course, we do know that they are trying to insert a lot of prequel trilogy continuity, and this by far is a very interesting transmission because it's said to be a transmission, a recording, if you will, of Darth Maul just before the events of the Phantom Menace, reporting in to Palpatine about his discoveries of the Dark Temples, the Wills, and the ancient Jedi and Sith ideology, and exactly how they became enemies. Now, we do know that Episode 9 is also going to have all these different types of revelations that will lead to saga-wide implications of the Skywalker saga, which may be a good or a bad thing for the Star Wars franchise. We'll have to wait and see. So anyways, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again. No, I'm not the one from night to morning.